So, it's manageable. I think the technology piece and how what faculty are expected to do is one of the harder parts, obviously. So that's where it's important, as I mentioned, to have the clear policies, to have support. Seriously, once you learn to do a PowerPoint and you have like a cheat sheet to walk you through it, to make it accessible, it's not that hard. And that's true of a lot of things. It's just that it's not something faculty know. And they need to be trained as you're training today, and then they need that extra support. They need the cheat sheets. They need resources, of which there are many. I had just sort of done a little outline of talking points, some of which we've already I've hit on, but a big piece of this is that you're getting more and more students with disabilities, with more diverse disabilities, with more serious disabilities. And we've talked about how technology is changing rapidly. It's really important, as I mentioned, that the commitment come from the top, and that all the departments, all the offices are real clear that we're going to comply with the ADA, and at times we may go beyond it to do what's best for our students, and that that's a clear expectation, and that the consequences are clear if that doesn't happen. And it's important for people to know that process. You know who the DSS people are. It's important for all of the faculty to know how that process works, and I think is there something today on that? Or is that something that you regularly communicate
in terms of
about?
awareness of where disability is?
Yeah, and what you do, and how you interact with the faculty.
Yeah, today there's a session going on from the DSS office, as well as we try to communicate that out through our website, through GRCC Today messages. What else, John? We have
a faculty email that goes out every semester.
Yeah, we have targeted email about note takers, like you mentioned in your keynote. And then we also have sessions that we put on through the professional development offices and Center for Teaching Excellence and stuff like that. But we'll be ramping some of those things up, I'm sure.
Good, and I think that regular communication is really critical. And what some colleges and universities do also is that they advertise success. There may be things that faculty members can do even on their own, or that they might not have come to you about, and it just didn't occur to them. So if you have an example of, a student with a learning disability was taking this class and tried to figure out this or that, and here's what we did. Or, this student who has a disability has now gone on to such and such. Even just sort of, and bringing in speakers, and by this I don't necessarily mean a person who's blind comes in and talks about what it's like to be blind, but I mean people go to a presentation and they find out that this esteemed mathematician uses a wheelchair. Promote diversity by integrating it into everything that you do, the speakers that you have, the books that you read, as the One Campus, One Book. It could be disability related. Your website, I think I saw in there in one of your brochures a person in a wheelchair, someone with a visible disability. But when you have something that's geared towards potential students, show students who have disabilities. Now, as I mentioned, not all of them will be visible, most of them aren't. But if you can just show people who've succeeded because they came here and they got accommodations. Show people with disabilities as part of student life. Your brochures, leadership positions. If you can work with student groups to get them to encourage people with disabilities to take leadership positions. If you have advisory groups, all these are places where just having people with disabilities sends a message that yes, we care, we're inclusive, and people can succeed. So that's part of making disability part of the institutional culture. I don't know if you do tours of campus for potential students, okay. And maybe you've thought about this, but is the route that they take accessible for the student and the parent? And do you have people with disabilities doing are they tour guides? Are they volunteers in other capacities? Students should be able to see that they have those opportunities not just in the classroom, but across the breadth of activities that you offer. A lot of campuses do have special, months or days I think October is now Disability Awareness Month as opposed to Employee Handicap Month like it used to be. But you don't have to wait for a particular time. You know, just try to integrate this into what you do throughout the year. And I am not one, I don't know if you've done this, and if you have, I don't mean to suggest that you shouldn't, but I'm not one to suggest that you have people come and, you know, be in a wheelchair for a day or a half a day or whatever. Some people do this. I think that it's like be poor for a day. No, you're not poor if you're poor for a day. But you can have exercises where someone goes around campus with someone who really uses a wheelchair in the way that people use wheelchairs, or spends a day or a half a day with someone who has a vision disability. If you have lunch with someone who can't see what they're eating, start to, you know, they say to you, tell me, you know, the potatoes are at noon on the plate and the carrots are at quarter past. You just learn how to interact with people with disabilities if you have those kinds of experiences, or if you have even an hour about disability etiquette and interacting with people. Things you see, you know, it's good to learn not to avoid common expressions like, you know, did you see such and such? It's okay to say that to a blind person. Did you see the show? Did you see the exhibit? You know, words that we use in everyday life, they're okay. And, you know, there's a lot to be learned just by doing that. I guess you can call it sensitivity or etiquette or just interaction training. So I think one of the things that we wanted to do today was talk about how do you establish the infrastructure here to help faculty succeed in providing accommodations, to help students succeed academically. And I think it's pretty clear that people know who DSS is. That's one of the things I always say, have them be visible, you know, have them repeatedly be visible. I think you're about to have an ADA coordinator. I'm not sure that that's what you're calling them, but that is a critical first step. And the responsibilities that you give them and where they are in the hierarchy, I understand they're going to report to the provost, which is wonderful. But you know, you may already be thinking about questions like, what authority do they have? How do you publicize the fact that they're here? And not just what are their authorities, but what are their responsibilities? But an ADA coordinator and a 504 coordinator are required by the regulations, and that's the person who basically coordinates and ensures compliance across the board. Now, the legal office has a lot to do with that, and you may want to think about where the decisions are actually made, whether the ADA coordinator actually makes important decisions or carries them out, and how they interact with DSS, with facilities. They would have an important role with respect to facilities, and as to capital planning. You know, how do you work accessibility into that? I know you got a lot of work going on. I was really impressed with that presentation yesterday about all that you're doing, and you've got some great facilities here. I was kind of awed by the logistics that are involved. You know, are you thinking about, and maybe you have, knowing you guys, you probably have, when a path that someone would normally take across campus is blocked because of construction, is there an alternate accessible way, and do you post it online and let people know that? So, you know, you just want to start getting people, if they're not already, get them to thinking about this is a part of everything you do. If you use someone else's space for an event, is it accessible? If you let someone else use your space, are you sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do under the ADA? Do you have an adequate number of interpreters that you can draw on? I understand you had a wealth of them yesterday. So all these are part of ADA compliance, and those things I just mentioned are things that an ADA coordinator will be involved with, but they obviously can't do it by themselves. It's one of those where it does take a campus. Have you guys done a self-evaluation of your policies and a transition plan about facilities?
You are correct. The last one that was done was the required one.
Okay.
1993, yeah.
So it's done.
Okay. I'll tell you, most colleges and universities did it, but they don't know where it is. And
We have it.
good. It's, you know, a lot of people have it in a file cabinet somewhere, and nobody goes to their file cabinets anymore. And then the other thing that happens is you have one and you don't go back and check and see that you're complying with it. Pretty common thing that happens, or it gets outdated. So it may not be that you need to totally redo it, and there's not a requirement that you redo it. I was hoping there would be in the new regulations, but if that's what you have to do to comply, then it is a requirement. It's just not a spoken one that's very specific. And I mentioned just in passing today about facilities that new construction and alterations have to be accessible, and I know you guys are probably thinking about that. You mentioned that you had brought in a lot of the best architects, designers, et cetera, around. And just to mention, one of the things where people get a little bollocksed up with this is there is a requirement, and it's new to state and local governments unless you've been following the ADA standards before. You used to have a choice of which standards to follow, and now you have to follow the ADA standards. And I don't want to get too technical about this, but if you alter part of a facility, like a classroom space, or sometimes carpet, alarms, etc. Let's say you're not altering everything, but you're altering a classroom space or a meeting space. That triggers something beyond just making that space accessible. It's the 20% rule. And some people just overlook this. It says that you make that space accessible and then you spend up to 20% of the amount of the planned alteration to provide an accessible path of travel, which means access to the space, like from parking to the entrance to the space, the restrooms serving it, water drinking fountains, I think you still have them, etc. So it's not just that space. Just be sure that those in charge of facilities, planning, design, etc., budget for that and know what the requirements are, because I think that is probably breached more often than it's complied with. And it can be hard to understand. In a lot of respects, keeping track of how you made your decisions, who was involved in them, and what you thought about in making them can be a big protection. You may mess up on the 20% rule, or you may mess up on the kind of accommodation somebody should have gotten. But if you show that you were aware of the requirements and you thought them through and you worked with the people who should be involved and you came up with a rational policy, the agencies will often defer to that. They usually will. In fact, there's case law that says if you've made a decision that this is an essential eligibility requirement to take this class, or allowing somebody to have 4 times the time on a test would fundamentally alter what the test is testing or the purpose of it. If you've documented that, you're usually in good shape. Now, maybe 5% of the time someone will still sue you and they might succeed. But that's another thing to think about is, a policy manual or something that documents, even if you don't share it with everyone on campus, documents how you made the decision, who was involved, and why you made it. Because you're not always going to get it right. That's what the law is about. That's why you have lawsuits, because people don't get it right or the law isn't clear, and there are a lot of things that aren't clear here, especially with technology as we've been discussing. So have the resources, have the policies that are clear, and have a record of how you got there. Regular training, professional development like this I encourage it. I think it's great, and in an area where people just sort of feel like deer caught in the headlights sometimes, that's a good area to do this kind of thing. Another thing to think about is provisions in your contracts, whether it's for designing or constructing a new building. Make clear what the standards are. Don't just say comply with the ADA. I recommend that you actually give them a very clear link or attach the standards. Make clear what you mean by the standards, because some people don't really realize that you can't just pick up the ADA guidelines. That's not all there is to the standards. Procurement, if you are procuring furniture or building a new lab or buying computers for computer lab, do the research to find out what's accessible. And you should actually have a plan there as well. We're going to have 5% of the lab stations be accessible. We're going to have 5% of the computer stations in the library or study area have an adaptable mouse or a software for people who need screen readers, software, etc. Again, plan. You may not get the right number. It's unclear what that number is. But plan for it and document it and have people be aware that they need to think about that when they're procuring copier machines that students or faculty use. Any type of equipment like that. Again, there aren't clear standards, but you can research and find what's available. Do you have a healthcare office here? Student health? Okay, good. Some things you can just kind of cross off, which is great. And then I don't know if you have, if someone needs to have a meeting, do they know what spaces they can use that are accessible? You have an inventory sort of?
I don't think so. No.
That's something else to think about. Yeah. And you can also just, have a central place where people maybe can schedule. If you need accessible space, here's what's available on that date. Make it easy for people. If you can, it might be harder for you to do that upfront work. So those are things to think about. And if I don't know how you want to do this. If you want to ask questions, if you want to have a working session, if you want to.
Actually, I have a question, Irene. I think there's some misunderstanding about the undue financial hardship provision. I think a lot of entities tend to wrap themselves around that as protection, and I understand that it's really a huge threshold to be able to meet. Let's just pretend that you have an institution that has a budget of about $110 million a year.
Assume, okay. More or less.
It's a change. In your experience, and I know that you'll need to be able to generalize, but what does undue financial hardship look like?
That can only be answered with a general statement. I don't know. And I don't know what is a due burden. It's sort of the flip side of the coin. I can say that no court has found one that I'm aware of. People have used that defense, so to speak. But I can tell you this much. If you think something is an undue burden, you don't just think of it as, is it an undue burden for this department? Or for this line item in the budget? Or however it is you're analyzing it? A court will look at all your resources. They'll look at the $110 million plus change, and they'll look at, could you increase your resources? Can you move them around? They won't just look at the English department or the French program or whatever. So then it does become a huge threshold it's a big threshold, high threshold. The other thing is, and the only one of the few cases that I'm familiar with where this came up was about interpreters. And a university said, well, yeah, we can give an interpreter to this student, but what if 1,000 people want interpreters? Then it's going to be an undue burden. And the court said that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at what's happening now. Basically, that's not how they said it, but we're looking at what's happening now and how your overall resources impact that. We're looking at all the resources. The other thing is, if you claim that something is an undue burden or a fundamental alteration, and it's in the context of your self-evaluation or making modifications, et cetera, document it. This is where the regulations are very clear. You can't say, for example, we're not going to make this building accessible at all, even though it's the only place where we have science classes, because it's an undue burden. Or we're not going to provide this accommodation because it's a fundamental alteration. The regulations say that you have to put that in writing. That decision needs to be made by the head of the agency. That's the term they use. And what it really means is the person who holds the purse strings, or the person who makes decisions. It's not necessarily the president, but it might be the head of the department. It has to be in writing, it has to be by the head of the agency, and it has to give the reasons that you're not doing something. And then you have to do what you can up to the point where it becomes an undue burden. So maybe, and another example of this is that it's not just undue financial burden, it's undue administrative burden. You may require students, or let's say you're having a meeting, this is easier. You may say, give us 3 days notice if you need an interpreter because of a hearing disability. And you say that because if you give the interpreting service 48 hours notice, the cost per hour goes up tremendously. So it's for your administrative convenience and to save money. And let's say somebody doesn't give you notice until 6 hours before, and you haven't lined up interpreters. Now, if you have a big meeting, you will have lined them up anyway, I hope, and not require people to ask. But let's say somebody comes 6 hours before, you can't just say, oh, that would be too hard. You violated our requirement. You have to try to get somebody. And until the point, I mean, if it's like an hour before, you're probably not going to get somebody, but if there is a possibility that you could make that accommodation, and I'm generalizing, then you need to do it. So in other words, those provisions don't help much. That's just the reality of it. Now, there are times when something is a fundamental alteration to a course, an accommodation might be, or yeah, it might just be something that is just so incredibly expensive or a waste of funding that you don't have to do it. And one example, there was a student at where was this? Seems like it was in Nevada. A student who needed an interpreter was given an interpreter, and DSS, being a brilliant DSS, had everybody who used interpreters sign a form. They counseled them before they got the interpreters, and they had them sign a form that said, you understand that if you miss 3 classes without letting us know, you're not going to get any more interpreter services. And you understand that there are 5 ways you can let us know. Email, phone, stop by, do this, do that. They made it easy to let them know. And they said how much time they needed in advance to know that. And then they said, you know, we'll work with you if there's a problem, but you just need to know that this is the case. So somebody didn't come to class. Well, a lot of students don't come to class, as I recall. And the idea is that you're not to penalize a person with a disability in a way that you wouldn't penalize others. But it was you weren't providing an accommodation that was needed. And OCR did a letter that I think is great, and they basically said that. They said, you are required to provide needed accommodations. If they aren't used, and it's clear they're probably not going to be used, you're not required to do it. And they pointed to the fact that this process was in place, that the person signed the agreement, that they have the opportunity to sort of rehabilitate themselves. You know, DSS might meet with them and say, you know, how come you missed these 3 classes? There might be a reason that's disability related or something going on in their lives, and then you could get a second chance. So all that was part of the policy. And again, they had thought this through. They had good reasons for doing it. The 3 misses and you're out is not necessarily the only correct rule, but these are the ways in which you can minimize the unnecessary expense. And they did look at the undue administrative burden issue there too. And it's just, it's too hard to have to wonder if the person's going to show up. So that's one way in which it can help you. Yes?
I actually have a question in a slightly different area. In terms of study abroad participation, what might be guidelines for accommodation for students participating and going to other countries, as well as for faculty and staff program leaders? So if you're traveling to, say, India, for example, where the rules are very different in
Yeah.
country.
That's not an easy question. It's not something that I know a whole lot about, but Mobility International USA, I think it's called. Do you know about them?
Yeah, I did hear an answer to this question.
It has a lot of good guidelines. Yeah.
At a recent
Go ahead.
conference, and an OCR, Office of Civil Rights presenter was
Oh,
giving the
good.
answer.
That's what you want to hear from.
Yep. So he said that actually, and I was actually surprised by this, but any study abroad trip that is outside of the U.S. does not fall under the ADA. Now, I've also heard contrary to that before that, so it made me nervous, I will say that, but...
Was it Howie or someone else?
No,
Okay, if it was Howie, he'd be right, but...
Okay.
Sorry.
So he said if it was in country, definitely any accommodations would have to be provided, whether it was, you know, wherever it was, but out of country, that seemed to be unclear. So I asked him a little bit more about that afterwards, because I had heard contrary to that previous to that.
Uh-huh.
But he said it will not apply outside of the country. So
The law
I don't know.
applies to entities in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
An embassy is considered in the United States because they own the land. It's on, technically that's U.S. land if it's our embassy. However, and I think the answer is correct, but with a caveat.
That's what I wondered.
I think what you have to do is give people options.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I would do, is to identify some activities, whether it's foreign study or field trips or whatever, where they can be accommodated. And I mean, that doesn't mean that, you know, a large university might have study in France and Italy and who knows, you know, number of places. And it might be that one location within that country or within Europe or whatever will work with you to ensure accessibility and they can participate. I think that is an obligation of the university because you're still here when you're making those plans. You are in the United States and you're working with students who are here and it's part of the activities that you offer. Now, if you want to have someone studying in, I don't know, Cinque Terre, Italy, where there's a cow train that goes between villages and it's not accessible and everything is hilly and steppy, you might not be able to do that because of the conditions that are there. You can't alter the country, the environment, et cetera. But I think you have an obligation to research and see. It's kind of like the procurement thing. You need to offer the opportunities, you need to do the research, you need to do what you can.
And he did say that that student should still be allowed to go. They would just
Yep.
understand that there would be restrictions potentially because of a mobility issue or whatever.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of who provides the interpreters, and that's something that you need to work out also.
Right.
This is an area that's not real clear, but I know there are a lot of good suggestions. If you go to, I think it's MIUSA, Mobility International USA, they're very big in students being able to study abroad. Sure. Yep.
Could you address the issue of obesity? Is obesity itself considered a disability?
It depends which court you ask, partly. In my view, and I think the courts would agree with this, if there's an underlying, well, and I hate to say this, if there's an underlying condition that causes the obesity, and it's morbid obesity, I mean, it's not just being a little overweight, and it's because of a disorder that is identified, almost always a court will say that it's a disability. Now, what that suggests is if all you do is, if you eat too much because you don't have any willpower and you're fat, then you're not covered. That may be what that suggests. There's been at least one court that says you don't look to whether there's an underlying condition. Okay, so that said, what are the accommodations? People who are obese may need a chair that's more substantial. They may need a toilet that's more substantial. There may be a number of, it's usually going to be a physical accommodation that they might need. And, you know, I've said that there aren't standards for some things like equipment. There aren't standards for the chairs that aren't attached. There are standards for those that are attached, but there aren't any standards that address obesity. There may, I assume that at some point in the next few years, the people who set the standards for the government will start looking at that. Because now they are looking at equipment, they're looking at accessible technology, they're looking at, you know, movable ATMs and kiosks as opposed to just fixed ones, vending machines, other types of things that you interact with, and come out with standards. And I think they'll be doing that for people who are obese as well, because for whatever reason, whether it's lack of willpower or being able to buy soda that's more than 18 ounces or whatever it is New York says, or maybe it's the food people not telling us what's really in it. I don't know, but for whatever reason, we are getting larger. And I think it's in the interest of you to think, do I want someone trying to sit in this chair and being terribly uncomfortable or breaking it, or do I want to provide some that will, you know, be an accommodation to that individual? I mentioned that you have to ensure that you have to ensure program access, and we didn't go into that. That could be a whole day or two. But that's the idea, that you can't discriminate against people because facilities aren't accessible. That includes equipment, and justice and education will say that, and I think that's where this whole concept comes in as a physical modification. If someone can't attend a class because there's not a chair they can sit in, you're denying them program access. So it is something that you need to take into consideration for procurement and other purposes.
Isn't anything that is an ICD or DSM diagnosis that creates a disabling condition under?
Not necessarily. I think most people will look at that, but their definition is not necessarily the same as the ADA definition. And in fact, I know there's a recent change about autism, I think it was. That doesn't necessarily change what the ADA definition is. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they equate.
How about
Substance
substance use?
abuse? Okay, see if I can get this right. Someone who, you can't discriminate against somebody because they have used drugs or alcohol. You can make decisions based on current illegal use of drugs. And that can be illegal use of a legal drug, a narcotic that you're not supposed to be using even though the drug is legal. And there are exceptions for healthcare and rehab institutions and that kind of thing. But you can't ban someone from a program because you know they are a drug addict, but their use of drugs is in the past. Now there are questions about what does current mean. Nobody really knows that. But the questions that usually come up are related to behavior that comes from abuse of drugs or alcohol. Then you deal with it as behavior. And you can make decisions, disciplinary decisions, based on how someone behaves. And I know this can be a big issue on campuses for obvious reasons, because most of the people are young and sometimes not too smart in their habits. But that's sort of a nutshell version of that. And again, it's useful to have training, education for people about that, and to make your policies clear both to the students and to faculty, because that's an area where it can be a little bit, things can be a little tricky. Yes?
I know software and technology is kind of not really clearly defined.
Mm-hmm.
What is the college's responsibility for purchasing software around ensuring that it's ADA compliant? Can we assume if we get certain information from the vendor, like VPAD information, that the software is ADA compliant, or do we have to go to additional testing?
Can you repeat the question?
He wanted to know if you can assume when you're procuring technology, software especially, can you assume that if the vendor tells you it's compliant that it is?
And provide a VPAD, which is voluntary product accessibility template, to us, saying that it is compliant.
What standards are they following, do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay. This is hard because there aren't any ADA standards. Your agreement says that you'll follow Section 508, which is the standard for federal agencies, and the W3C. I don't always get that right because it used to be WCAG or something, which is the industry standard and which is updated on a fairly regular basis. So I would do both things. I would ask for certification and ask them what standards they're following, but I would also test it. There are programs that will test software and will test web pages, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's fine, and we're doing that.
But it takes time, I know.
Yeah, it's all the classroom and
Yeah.
other software that's going to be the problem.
And you may find that if you have a vendor who makes that representation, and they're usually right, you might start to trust the vendor, unless it's something that's, you know, very recently developed, in which case you might want to test it again. But I think especially since you're under this compliance agreement, and because the government is looking so carefully at these things, and I know you're going to Gmail, and I hope somebody has evaluated that, because there there was litigation about that recently. I don't know how it got resolved, but all these things. You can't, you know, something that huge, you can't just trust. You know, I'm sure that Amazon said that Kindle was accessible and probably didn't really know what it meant. But I think if you have a vendor who you've come to trust and know, it's less, there's probably less of a need to test everything. So, yes. Katie, next.
I make sure I ask this properly, but what, in terms of program admission, so we have some programs where there are requirements, physical or otherwise, of anyone to be able to perform in that given occupation. And so therefore, within the curriculum, there are some basic sort of performance. So I'm thinking of like there's a new proposed EMS program, and if we were blind, is it? So there's work here. Do you see? What
It's a big question. Yeah, it's.
How do you, sometimes I think with lifting, with Don asked about the obesity
Yeah.
issue, where it's
Yeah.
have a hard time because of various disabilities performing.
Part of the question becomes, what is the purpose of the program? If the purpose of the program is to produce licensed EMS people, that's one thing. If you have a class that is open to others that aren't necessarily going to be active EMS people, you may have to make accommodations for that class. But you don't have to change your essential eligibility requirements and your technical standards. Again, this is the kind of thing that you look at on a case-by-case basis. You should work with DSS and legal, definitely for that. It comes up in nursing, for example. You know, people with hearing impairments can use stethoscopes that convey information not just through the use of sound. There are a number of accommodations with technology. You know, it's our friend and our foe, but it's our friend a lot of times now. There's a lot that technology is doing in the healthcare area to enable people to do those jobs. Not everyone who gets a nursing degree is going to go into actual nursing. So one thing you need to do is sort of look at whether it's essential to your program. That's what's important more than is it essential to licensing. Attorneys, for example. People used to think a deaf person can't be an attorney. They can't go into court and argue. Well, with an interpreter they can, and they don't necessarily go into court. And they might do everything in a written form. And that's just a real easy example. But some of these can get a little difficult. You're raising a good point, though, but basically you don't have to change your essential eligibility requirements. But you also need to sort of think about a different analysis. What does the degree represent? Does the degree represent that this person can do everything that a licensed nurse has to do, or is there another piece of the process that comes later, which is often the case? I mean, you're not an attorney until you're licensed by the bar, but you can get a law degree and never practice law, which, you know, I think that analogy works in other areas sometimes too. Have you dealt with that in DSS?
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how far people can go. Like there are blind doctors, or doctors who have visual impairments. There are nurses who have one arm. So there's a lot of adaptations that can be made. Sometimes it seems like it's an essential component of a program, but when you really flesh it down, it's only one small little requirement for that particular course or that particular day, and maybe lifting a patient for a nurse is not an essential requirement, even though that's something they could do.
Well, in fact, there are 10 states now that ban nurses from lifting patients. They require no lift policies in hospitals, acute care hospitals, sometimes in nursing homes, and this is, of course, to protect the nurses more than it is for the sake of accessibility, but it has a side benefit. I don't know if you're one of the states. I know that Illinois and California are that way, but as society changes, the requirements, the physical requirements can change, and that's a good example, I think. I was at a conference once, and I was with a panel of people from the government and consultants and DSS people, and we were taking questions, and the leader of this had some if there weren't enough questions. And it was fun because if we took more than 2 minutes to answer the question, we would get squirted with a water pistol. So I brought a slicker. It was great. I brought a slicker for the person that I thought would probably be wet first, and I was right. But we did not run out of questions, and we had some interesting ones, and one of them was about, somebody asked us, is there an accommodation for a student with sheep rumping?
What?
Sheep rumping, and we wondered, what is that? And my response was, I think it's illegal in most states. But we quickly got on the blackberries and everything, and what it's doing something to the rump of a sheep. And there was a veterinarian student who couldn't do what you had to do because they used a wheelchair and because of where they would place the sheep's rear end so that you did this. I don't know if it was shearing or something. It wasn't as bad as it sounded. But the ADA coordinator for Ohio State, I think, or somewhere, was there, and they have a veterinarian program, and he talked about the accommodations they've done. They do have a lift for sheep rumping and other types of things that veterinarians might be required to do. So use your imagination. You can often come up with means of accommodating people. See the web for more about sheep rumping. Did you have a question, or did I get yours? I'm sorry, what? Nursing.
For nursing moms.
Oh, nursing moms. Being a nursing mom is not a disability.
That's come up a couple times.
Yeah,
That do we have space available for that?
yeah. You don't have to.
We
It's
actually,
nice if you do. She asked about nursing moms, if you have to have space for them. That's good. Good people. You're not required to because of the ADA. No, right, because it's not a disability. In fact, one of the things that University of Florida offered for our daughter when she was there with narcolepsy was, they said, do you want a space to rest? You can go to the health office and we can know what your schedule is, and if you need a room, we can do that. And there are people who, because of issues that create fatigue, may need that. I'm not saying you definitely, in every building you have to have a bed, but scheduling classes can help with that. You may need at times to provide space. Well, when you have narcolepsy, you don't need a space. You just go to sleep. So she was fine, but I mean, again, being creative and talking to the individual about what they need if they do have a disability that's the key. It's talking to them about what works for them, talking to the faculty members about how do you do this.
Irene, did I understand you correctly to state that in the instance of lots of our renovations, and we're going to be purchasing lots of furniture for one of our new buildings, including major floor renovations, that the accommodation and furnishings isn't articulated as far as a percentage for the space within the standard? That is an institutional determination we make?
If it's fixed furniture, if it's fixed tables, if it's fixed lab stations, if it's a fixed ATM, there are standards. If it's not fixed, then the legal requirement that applies is the program access requirement that you can't discriminate because of facilities, and equal opportunity, and Justice has explained this in the context of those requirements. And what they've said is that you look to the standards, the corresponding standards for fixed facilities, to determine what to do with those that aren't fixed. There will be standards coming out for equipment. The rulemaking process has started. The first thing they're doing is medical diagnostic equipment, but that's not something that will affect you unless you train people in using diagnostic of your healthcare services. So you need, generally it's 5% of the seating in a restaurant, for example, or in a classroom, if it's fixed, has to be accessible. So that would be, as far as scoping, how many, you would look to the standards. And then as to what that means, that's the hard part. What is an accessible examination table, for example? There aren't any standards. There are suggestions. From Justice, when you look at their settlement agreements, it's something that lowers to 17 inches, that's wide enough for a patient that has, the accessories are accessible, etc. But there are standards for what an accessible table is. It's usually the height and the knee space that matter. So you should follow that, I would say, for 5% of the seating in like in here where the tables aren't fixed. That's your best guidance. Yes, ma'am.
I wonder what your thoughts are. We have an institutional requirement, which is a wellness, which is a physical activity class. So every student must have 1 credit of wellness in order to receive their associate degree.
Mm-hmm.
We only have, I think, 1 option, which is not physical in terms of the class.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, what are your thoughts?
What kinds of classes are they? What do you offer?
Physical education type classes. What's required?
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because one thing I didn't mention is there are requirements for exercise equipment. There aren't requirements for what a piece of accessible equipment is, but you are required to have space up to 1 of each type of equipment so that someone can get to it and transfer to it. There's a lot of adaptive recreation, a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of information out there about how to adapt equipment and recreation activities. There are, if you have enough, there's some controversy about should people with, in some cases, having a person with a physical disability who uses a wheelchair participate in certain sports with others who don't use a wheelchair is going to be a hazard. And one example is basketball. That usually doesn't work. Now, some people would disagree, but you can have a wheelchair basketball league. You can have, you're generally not supposed to have separate programs. That's one of the requirements of the ADA. But you can have them where it's necessary. So if it's necessary to have a different type of offering that works for people with disabilities because for health or safety reasons you can't integrate them, then you can have a separate program. But you may also be able to adapt some of the programs. People can dance in wheelchairs. People can do upper body exercise in wheelchairs. I had ankle surgery a year ago and I got a tape. It's kind of amusing. Exercising in a chair. Okay, one more? Should I? Yeah. Does someone who didn't have, yes, sir.
One that comes to mind, and there's workforce people here, there's a weight requirement on wind turbine technicians where they climb, and it seems like that would be an occupation.
If there's a requirement that you go into a space, you have to go into that space. If you can't go into that space, then that's a pretty good example of a technical requirement that you'd have to meet. Now in employment, there's kind of a different analysis from the academic world because, we were talking earlier about, are you preparing somebody, are they getting a degree that shows what they know and what they can do, or is it just preparing somebody for a certificate and licensing? That's why it's a little different academically, but in employment, you can set physical requirements if they're essential. Yeah, okay. And you don't have to provide an elevator up there either. Generally. Anything else? Okay. Thank you guys. Those are good questions. Oh, good, good.
You all know, it should be pretty obvious when you walk back out. The food stations that are set up now. We have a
that went fast.
buffet with several options and several desserts. Help yourselves. You can come back here.
The food's great, and they're healthy options. I had soup last night and